Applying to law school was at first a little daunting.
Definitely a new experience for me.
I didn't know exactly where to first start.
There's just so many parts to it.
I made a bunch of charts, I made a bunch of lists, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had a timeline for everything.
I'm sure I created a spreadsheet of the schools and all of the relevant deadlines.
You really want to think about where your career may take you or where you dream for it to take you.
Good morning. Welcome to the LSAC Forum Ask an Expert session. We're here live in New York City this morning at the New York Forum hosted by LSAC. If you attended the financial aid session, welcome back and thanks for sticking with us. If you're just now joining us, we're really happy that you're able to participate. Welcome. So I can hear the buzz outside of the forum as it's actually happening. Matthew, we're kicking off some of the educational programs right next door, and we do expect to see about 700 people today, and we saw about 700 yesterday. So it is busy and exciting outside.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, and down the hall we have 188 ABA accredited law schools ready to meet with prospective students. We're really excited to bring to you this event via live stream, and so you can get some questions answered and take the next step on your journey in your law school application process. In this edition of Ask the Expert, we will be covering the application process. At the next session, we'll have experts on pre-law advising to speak with you. And if you missed our previous session on the financial aid, you'll be able to view it on demand. You'll receive an email out later when it's available next week.
So we're going to take just a very brief moment to introduce ourselves to you. My name is Kristen Thies-Alvarez. I'm the Director of Outreach and Recruitment for the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. I am from the Bay Area. I attended school, including law school, in the Bay Area. And I've been in an admissions role for about 10 years. I'm involved in all aspects of the admissions process, including some financial aid. And I'm very excited to be participating here today.
Likewise. My name is Matthew Lee. I'm with the University of Washington School of Law in Seattle, Washington as the Assistant Dean of Admissions. And like Kristen, I've been doing this for about 10 years now and very excited to be here. I too attended law school. I'm from the Texas area and then went to law school in Ohio. And so very excited to be here and to answer any questions that you may have.
And we do have some other folks here who are helping us out and available to answer questions. Specifically, we have Misty Miller, who's from LSAC. She's going to answer questions that pertain to LSAC services and processes. Misty?
Good morning. My name's Misty, and I'm here to answer anything. A lot of great questions so far, so keep them coming, and I'm here to help.
Great.
And we'll also have a few short segments with some LSAT developers from Law School Admission Council throughout the program.
Hi, I'm James Laurier.
And I'm Ben Tice.
We have some great information for you if you're going to be taking the LSAT.
If you have questions while we're speaking, don't forget to use the Questions tab.
And through the magic of technology, we actually have James here in the room in addition to on the video. James?
Yes, hi Kristen, I'm here and I'm ready to answer questions if there are any.
Great. So to be clear, the questions tab is on the left. We hope that you'll use this to ask questions of us at any time. They show up automatically in front of me and we can move through them. This session will be really dynamic and interesting as we are able to respond to your particular questions and help you navigate this process. I'm going to read those questions out loud and we'll do our very best to answer them. It would be lovely if you could also include the city and state that you're writing in from so that we can share that information. It's great to have a sense not of the room literally, but of the room virtually and who is actually here and able to participate.
Yes, this is really a great opportunity to ask all of your questions, in particular about self-assessment, the things that you would want to consider before you venture in this process, in addition to questions related to scheduling and timing, related to when you should take the LSAT, when you should start preparing, when you should submit an application, what is considered early and timely, and then certainly the questions related to writing personal statements, which I think you and Kristen would agree that we could do an entirely different session on. And so, yeah, any kinds of questions you have, please.
Great. And then just to highlight one additional feature of this virtual forum, you're able to use the chat function that you'll see, and that allows you to chat with your peers and learn from one another. You can also visit the schools tab, and that's on the main page for this event. It has a list of all the schools who sponsored the LSAC forums and their contact information. You'll probably hear us again and again say that some questions may be school specific, and that for each expert sitting up here, there are corresponding experts at actual schools who are the best source of information for the particulars about their school and their process.
Before we start answering your questions, we'd like to show you a short video on navigating the application process. It may give you an idea of the kinds of questions that you'd like to ask.
So you've made the decision to apply to law school. You've got a lot to look forward to, and with a bit of organization and planning, navigating the application process will be easier than you think. First, sign up for a free, secure account at lsac.org. You can do everything from registering for the law school admission test, or LSAT, to applying online. Next, prepare to take the LSAT. Familiarize yourself with the test instructions, the different question types, and timing. The key to test success is to practice, practice, and then practice some more. Use LSAC's official guide to ABA-approved law schools to search for law schools that are the best fit for you. Consider things like school size, location, faculty, and special programs. Be sure to learn each school's admission requirements and application deadlines. Sign up for LSAC's free candidate referral service, known as CRS. It's an opportunity to be discovered and recruited by law schools you may not have considered. After researching schools online, it's time to get more personal. Go to an LSAC Law School forum to talk face-to-face with law school representatives from more than 150 ABA-approved law schools. Before the first law school application is due, sign up for the Credential Assembly Service, or CAS. It's required by all ABA-approved law schools and will help simplify your application process. You can have all of your transcripts, letters of recommendation, and other credentials submitted just once, regardless of the number of schools you're applying to. LSAC will compile all of the required documents for your online law school application. Track the status of your law school applications and other documents through your LSAC account. Good luck and congratulations on your decision to apply to law school. For more information about navigating the application process, visit lsac.org and attend an LSAC Law School forum near you.
Welcome back. Briefly, we failed to mention that we'll also be doing some polls throughout this. So it's an opportunity to be interactive and also for us to get a sense more about who you are. I think Matthew has one that he wants to start off us with.
Absolutely. I'm just curious, what time zone is everyone viewing this live stream on?
Yes, how many of you are out at 6 a.m. in my neck of the woods or our neck of the woods?
It's going to populate behind you, so you can come back to it, but you can look over and see.
Oh, great.
Starting to populate. It'll take a few minutes. So, yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people from Pacifics joined us since the last session.
Yes, they heard we were going to be here.
Good morning.
So let's actually transition to the really fun part of this, which is your questions, and they are coming in, and we do appreciate that you're sending them. I've got one from Isabel, and she's thinking about applying in fall of 2018 and is asking what she should be doing now to prep for her application process next fall. Do you have anything that you might advise someone who's looking at this sort of from a year from now perspective?
Yeah, I mean, someone who is a year out from now really is in a prime position to really do the work, to really do the kind of thoughtful research in exploring the different kinds of law schools that are available to the candidate. You know, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that you would want to think about is sort of the self-assessment aspect before you start putting pen to paper, starting to draft personal statements. And things, you know, for example, you know, wherever, Isabel, you know, you attend undergrad, Is it a small school? Is it a large school? Will it be an environment in which you will excel at? So, some of the things that I encourage students to think about is to think about the kind of education environment from which the student will be academically successful. What is the class size going to be like? What is the student-faculty ratio is going to be like? And so you have to, take some time to really think about that. One of the things that I think, from the application perspective, when faculty, readers, and committee reviews are evaluating candidates, they're looking at leadership aspects as well. And so someone who's still in college, one of the things that they can focus on is developing some of those leadership skills, joining organizations or taking on leadership roles. And so I think that's some of the things that they can really do, about a year out. But also professional experience is also something that is valuable as well. And so, going out and doing internships, doing, externships as well is also something that I would encourage a student to do.
And actually, I'm going to ask James whether you have any specific advice for someone in terms of timing their prep for the LSAT.
So let's see, the fall, I think we're applying for the fall of 2018, so they'll probably be taking the test roughly a year from now, maybe into December, February. I think the most important thing to do in terms of long-term preparation is to keep in mind that it is a skills test. This is what I tell my audiences when I do the presentation here at the forums. It's a test of reading and reasoning skills. So before they even crack open a practice book or whatever, one good thing to do is just spend time reading difficult material, bone up your reading skills, challenge yourself with reading material, and also any kind of reasoning you can do. If you're still in college, you can maybe take some difficult classes in anything from history, philosophy, economics that require you to read some difficult material and reason with that material. Then, several months beforehand, and there is no magic number, so I can't tell you how far out in advance, but probably several months rather than weeks, you will want to pick up some books with previously used LSATs and start practicing. And basically, familiarizing yourself with all the question types is really key. Just practice as much as you can fit into your schedule on previously used tests, and that really should be very helpful.
Great, thank you for that. We have a question that's somewhat related to LSAT, but actually I think may fall within Misty's purview, which is if the applications from some of the law schools that I'm applying to are due in March, how do I provide my LSAT scores if I'm taking the LSAT in February? So this is a question maybe of how LSAC and the law schools communicate and share information for applicants who are in the process.
Well, they would want to make sure that February is still a valid score. The application will still go out without the score, but now the school has to wait to review their admission until the score comes out. Ideally, it's better to plan ahead of time, maybe take the December or October exam. But once the score is available, it will go out. Your application will go out. It'll just hold your report until you take the test.
And students can request that report be sent to schools, or schools request those?
The schools request those.
Correct. Okay,
but
great.
They do get a message that there's no score yet.
Right. And I think it is important to highlight for people that this is a difference between schools around whether or not we accept the February test score.
Correct.
So there will, just be sure that you've done your research, come to a forum, pick up the phone, or send an email to an admissions officer to ask and make sure that the schools that you're targeting do in fact accept the February test.
Exactly, correct.
And if they do, then they will receive automatic updates from
correct.
LSAC and get the score once.
Exactly, yes, exactly.
Okay. Great, fantastic. We have a number of questions that are related to work experience. I'm going to ask Scott's question, who asks, how much does work experience factor into the admissions decision? do you have any particular response to that?
Yeah, I'll certainly, encourage students to certainly ask these same questions to the different schools that they're interested in, because I think each school is going to answer it slightly different. There are some schools that truly value professional experience, and, a good sort of gauge is to look at the average age at the university, at the law school itself. And so, I'll speak, specifically to us. Our average age is about 26 years old. So when you think about it, most students who are graduating from undergraduate school are about 21 or 22 years of age. And so if the average age is about 26, then that means many of the students are taking at least 2 to 3 years after college to get some professional experience. And when we talk about how do you separate yourself, how do you separate your application and distinguish yourself among thousands and hundreds of other applications, professional experience really is a key way to make that drawing sort of distinction. And so, from the admissions committee's perspective, that's where the committee will be able to assess the diverse way in which the student will be able to contribute to the legal classroom. Even from the employer's perspective, one of the things, I don't know if you've had these conversations with employers now, as many of us know, the employment market is rebounding, and so employers have said that the students or the candidates that they interview that really sort of sets them apart from other candidates is also the professional experience. And so not only is it helpful from the admissions committee review's perspective, but it seems to be very important also from the employment perspective as well. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we sometimes describe the decision-making process is sort of as a two-part test. This may be a little inaccurate in that we all generally employ a holistic review process, so it is not a linear kind of decision-making system. But I think it's helpful for applicants to sometimes think about it in terms of these sort of two parts. One is, do we think that you could come to our law school and be successful? Right? Nobody is admitting students because we think they're going to fail. We want them to do well, and we want to provide them all the resources that they need in order to succeed. LSAT, undergraduate record, overall academic record, and some other information can really help us answer that question of, do we think they can come to law school, to our law school in particular, and be successful as a student? Most of us consider that basically a necessary but not sufficient condition. So we ask another question, which is, okay, you're bright and you have great potential. What else do you bring to the table? What distinguishes you from the other person who has virtually the same numerical qualifications? And that's where things like personal statement, letters of recommendation, and experience show up. I use the word experience as opposed to work experience because I think that there are lots of students who are 21 or 22 and coming straight out of undergraduate school who have lots of experience. They've done lots of things during the summer. They've had internships and externships. They have life experiences and maybe they have work experience. But I do think that law schools place a premium on experience and a track record for having been engaged in issues that you care about, whether it's through your undergraduate career or well beyond that and into your professional career.
Yeah.
Great. Briefly, we touched on personal statement just now and how that might work within the larger admissions consideration process. We have a question from Jennifer, who's from Fort Worth, so your neck of the woods originally, who asks, I'd love to know what makes a great personal statement, and actually, in particular, as someone who's entering law school after a decade of working in a different field. So this is the extension of the previous question in some ways. Do you have any specific hints for her?
Yeah, hi, Jennifer from Texas. The personal statement really is, the make it or break it sort of, for us. When it comes to evaluating candidates, as Kristen mentioned, there are not really a dearth of applicants who have the statistical profile. The students who are above, our median's LSAT and GPA. And not everyone is admitted, with that statistical profile. And that distinguishing factor is truly that personal statement. And even for the students who don't have those benchmarks, that's where a personal statement could really elevate, that student's candidacy, because there's something about that candidate in which, the committee has responded quite favorably and quite positively to. Someone who's had a decade long of experience, I know one of the key questions that the faculty committee will be, interested in is to understand why at this point in this candidate's life that legal education makes the most logical sense for them. Someone who has sort of primed themselves to go to law school, someone who has interned for a senator, someone who really was in a pre-law education, it makes sense to a reader that this person is applying to law school. People who've had, sort of less traditional paths to law school, maybe working in a completely separate industry, or they thought about going to law school, but, their career trajectory took them to, sort of another place. I know the committee is usually interested in, again, why at this point is legal education the most logical sense for them? And, what can we sort of do in terms of assisting this candidate to achieve their career aspirations? And so, though they may be able to articulate, all of the wonderful things that they've accomplished up to this point, I think that would be a very key element to helping the admissions committee, decide whether this is someone who, would be a good fit for the education.
There's only a couple of real rules about personal statements. One of them is follow directions. Mm-hmm. So there are schools that are going to ask different things. And you should write certainly a general personal statement, but you should have the expectation going in that you'll be writing many, many different versions of that same statement. Sort of taking it apart potentially and putting it back together, or tailoring it more narrowly to a specific school. There's a common mistake, and I don't think it's just for people who've maybe been out in the professional world longer, but it's also for people coming straight from undergraduate school, which is there's a tendency to want to write about sort of where you are right now in your life and what's next for you. And that's more along the lines of something we'd expect to see if we were asking for a statement of purpose. So your direction, your intention, your plan moving forward, the specific area of law you might go into, etc. A personal statement typically asks a different kind of question, which is that it asks you to take inventory certainly of where you are now, but to look backwards at where you've come from and kind of the distance traveled and your personal journey that's delivered you to the point where the next thing that makes sense for you is law school. So while talking about professional experiences may be absolutely relevant, remember that we're going to have your resume. Mm-hmm. Remember that we may be asking other questions about the kind of work experience that you have from the past, and you do not want to squander the opportunity in your personal statement to bring something else to the table in terms of your story. So take full inventory of all the places that you have to talk about professional experiences, including letters of recommendation, which could be from employers, resume or other places, and what's not being shared. And that's probably what should end up more in your personal statement, because it's just such a risk when you focus on, even if they're incredible, a lot of professional accomplishments, and we don't feel like we met the actual person behind them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have someone who's asking, Sydney actually, from Los Angeles, what common mistakes do we see in applications, and whether we think they would reflect if the candidate would be a good fit for our school?
Wow, that's a very loaded question, and I'm sure we can spend another 30, 40 minutes, just on sort of the mistakes that we've seen in applications. But I think you really touched based on, one of the bigger sort of mistakes that we tend to see when reading files, and that is when students really duplicate aspects of their application. As Kristen mentioned, we have your resume, we have your letters of recommendations, and when a personal statement is essentially a narrative of their resume, it is a squandered opportunity. It is a wasted opportunity to share something, to the admissions committee that, really explains, all of the things that we're looking for. And so I would say that would be, a big mistake. Another mistake that, I've seen is, like Kristen said, not following directions. Mm-hmm. And you'd be very surprised how something so small will have such great impact and a negative impact when it comes to, file review readers. because there are thousands and hundreds of applications, and you don't want to give the admissions committee any opportunity to say, oh, well, this person, isn't a good fit because of X, Y, Z. Now, it may not make or break necessarily, it may not be that detrimental, but it doesn't necessarily sort of make the admissions committee feel that good about the application, kind of moving through other elements of the application review. So, those are two big ones, but I'll let you share a couple ones.
No, the only one that sort of pops to mind, remember, you go to law school to train to be an attorney, and one of the skills that's absolutely requisite is attention to detail, right? Where a comma in the wrong spot could really make a difference in a contract. In general, I advise people don't talk about specific schools in their personal statement because it's just such a risk if you accidentally send me the one that you've written for Matthew or vice versa. It's, again, probably not the end of the review at that point, but we sometimes worry a little bit about lack of attention to detail. And actually, we do want to do a poll at this point. Because we've been talking about statements, and we want to ask the folks that are out there, how many of you have already written or started writing your personal statement? So, feel
Great,
free.
we'll pull that up in just a minute. You'll be able to look back in a second.
No worries, that sounds great. Sticking with our statement theme, we have a question from Catherine about what makes a strong supplemental essay. She says, there's a lot of emphasis and information about the personal statement, but for those of us who want to give law schools more information about who we are, what should we emphasize in the optional essays that can help us stand out? So, optional essays are exactly that, they're optional. I'll give you a couple of quick examples of prompts I've just seen so we can have some context for people who maybe aren't sure what a supplemental essay is. I think there are two types. We're talking about optional ones, but just there is a required type of supplemental statement that sometimes is triggered if you disclose that there was misconduct in your past. That's a different issue. So the typical ones that, in terms of supplements fall into these sort of why X school category. So why University of Washington? What about our school, community, curriculum, location appeals to you? Another one is what's often called a diversity statement. So it's a supplemental statement about what you bring or would bring to the school's community in terms of diversity, and typically that's very broadly defined. And a third may be something that we often refer to as an addendum, usually, which is an explanation about something that we'll notice that you're concerned about would be a negative in your application. So someone who wants to point out that they did not perform particularly well in the LSAT, but that they have a 4.0 in their undergraduate school, and that they believe we should give that greater weight. So those are sort of the usual three that are either put out there in an application or that people can send even as supplements even without the school actually asking. What do you look for in those? What makes them effective?
Yeah, certainly something different, maybe a different perspective. Of course, follow directions. If the school is asking you about a specific prompt, certainly address that prompt. But sometimes, where a student basically reiterates and repeats their personal statement, that isn't necessary. That's not where, an optional statement really benefits the student. We ask very specific questions, for our optional statements, and so, the response related to, how does the student define the motto for the institution, which is important for the admissions committee to understand sort of again related to the personal statement, in that we're trying to assess what is it about the institution that we would be able to serve the candidate, and so it relates to that. It's a missed opportunity, again, if the student is essentially repeating their personal statement. And I would say that's probably one of the things that we're looking for, is one, answering the question, but also, is it something different from, their personal statement?
Right. Sometimes I tell people, if instead of an application, I said, let's go have lunch, and we had a couple hours to sit down and talk. What would be the 4 or 5, 10 things I would need to know about you to really know who you are in terms of your background? So if I already have your resume and I already have some of that information, and if you, I mean, I've written a personal statement, you've written a personal statement. We all know you can't, they're not a kitchen sink. You cannot just dump everything in there. And so you have to sort of organize them by theme or sort of pull the narrative together in a particular way. Sometimes that means that you privilege certain aspects of your background and sort of others are more quiet. If those quieter ones are important to you, they should find a place in the application as a whole to land. So to me, the time for a diversity statement or for a why this school statement is really when you focus on other things in your personal statement, but you have another part of your story that you want to share. And I do think they're a tremendous opportunity to add just that bit of difference that helps us understand more about who you are. And they're going to be a feather on the scale, not a 10-pound weight, but that sort of accumulation of feathers can actually make a really big difference.
What was the response to the poll? Let's take a look.
So most people have not started, the vast majority of people have not started writing their personal statement, which I think is probably typical unless you're actually applying right this cycle. I just would like to put in the plug, James talked about how long you might prep for the LSAT. One of the common mistakes that I see is people do really emphasize, and I think appropriately emphasize, the preparation for the LSAT. However, most of us think that the personal statement is just as important in terms of the role that it plays in the process. And if you're going to spend weeks months preparing for the LSAT, don't leave your personal statement until the last minute. You should be going through multiple drafts, multiple revisions, maybe having multiple people look at it with an emphasis on picking up different kinds of things and doing as much research and as much preparation for that part of the process as you would for any of the other parts of the process. So we have a question from Joyce, who says that she's applying for fall of 2017, so in the application process right now, and basically has all of her materials ready for submission, wants to have applications in by this November, but the school she's applying to, or she would apply to early decision, doesn't offer it. Should she bother to apply early anyway? Early in the process as opposed to early decision. Maybe you want to talk about just what early decision is.
Sure.
Typically.
Typically early decision programs, at law schools, provide students with an opportunity to submit their application early, which then allows them to receive a decision earlier and sometimes make them very competitive for scholarships. And it's going to vary from school to school, but generally speaking, that's what an early decision program is. And some of the early decision programs also require the students to take their application out of the rest of the application process from other schools, and they cannot start other applications as well. And it's going to vary slightly again from school and schools individually. Most schools review applications on a rolling admissions basis, and so typically that means when an application is submitted, it is completed for just completeness from the staff, and then it gets submitted to the admissions committee, who then renders a decision. And so by submitting an application early, earlier in the process, most of the seats that are available from the law school have not been rendered. And so have not been offered. And so by submitting an application earlier, that's always advantageous, really, from our perspective. And so I would say that a student who submits an application by the end of the calendar year, or even, of course, this relates to whenever the application deadline is, I would say even at the end of January is still considered very early. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, for us, our application deadline is February 1st. So it just depends on the school. There are schools that will be taking applications until February, March, June. It very much varies. I think it's important for those who are looking at the application process to find out whether a school uses rolling admissions or rolling notification, depending on their process. And what that essentially means is that as they receive complete applications, do they review those and begin making decisions and begin extending offers? That would be as opposed to sort of having a window of applications, collecting them at the end, and then looking at the entire pool and making decisions at that point. In the case of rolling admissions, you're absolutely correct, which is that you may start with 800 offers to make on September 1st, and as you read files, you're handing out those offers, and there may be fewer and fewer offers towards the end of the cycle. A big caveat is that no school is in a desperate rush to fill its class. We're looking for the best people, not the earliest people. So this process is not designed to exclude folks who are great candidates for our school who happen to apply later in the process. And we do a lot of analysis and data collection to sort of understand what the pool looks like and make sure that we are going to have spots available to folks. But this is something you can control in the process, right? If your undergraduate career is over, you're not going to go back and redo it, and your grades are your grades. You can control when you apply, and so in general, I think it's useful to think about, in a perfect world, applying relatively early, particularly for school employees rolling admissions. And actually, we have a poll up right now that's when are you planning to apply to law school. So the vast majority of people who are with us right now are applying are applying next year. So they fall into the category of folks who are looking at this kind of with 12 to 18 months in front of them to prepare, which is excellent, fantastic. Yeah. So this is a return a bit to an LSAT question, and so James, you can get ready. Is it okay to take the LSAT more than once? That's Shivani's question, and we might chime in at the end with the school's perspective, but we'd love to hear yours.
So from the point of view of LSAC, yes, you are allowed to take the LSAC up to 3 times in 2 years, and that's perfectly fine. There is typically a bit of a jump, a bump in the score on the second taking. Not huge, it's around 2 or 3 points typically. Now, as far as whether that will be to your advantage in terms of the schools you'd like to apply to, you really should talk to the schools about what they expect and what they would look for, and whether they would consider the highest score, etc. And so I think with that, I'll bounce it back to you guys.
Matthew, do you have anything to contribute?
Well, students who take the LSAT, we understand the importance of the LSAT in the admissions process. So typically students will take it, 1 to 2 times, sometimes 3 times to make themselves competitive for scholarships. And so, ask the question whether the schools average the scores or take the highest score. I think most schools will take the highest score. And so 1 to 2 times, 3 times at most, is totally fine from the admissions committee's perspective.
Yeah, it's more and more common to see people who have taken it more than once. My advice, having taken the LSAT, is prep once, do it once, do as well as you possibly can. Go forward and don't look back. But it is also the case that it is also the case that there are many reasons, excellent reasons, that people choose to take it more than one time. And we're very accustomed to seeing multiple test takers. We will see all of your scores. We will see an average score. We will see a score range, which sort of represents the standard deviation on the test. We will see if you cancel a score. We will see if you don't appear for a test. So we have lots of information, but I think the default for the vast majority of schools is to give you the benefit of the highest score that you've taken when considering your aptitude or potential. So this is a tricky one. Matthew, ready? I think it's a tricky one. So Brittany, who's from Houston, I'm just going to give you all the Texans from now on, asks whether she should apply to schools where their reported median LSAT and GPA are above where you're scoring, or should you stay safe with schools in your range, or I suppose where you're in their range. So if someone's doing their research, as they should be, maybe they're coming to a forum, going online, using the official guide to ABA-approved law schools that LSC provides on its website, and looking at what the medians are for a particular school, how should they use that information?
Yeah. Well, this is also a great reminder to candidates out there that, law schools are required to provide consumer information, important information to you as an applicant on their website and also through the ABA. And so it's called the 509 reports. And so that provides, a lot of valuable information, not only in terms of the statistical profile for the institution, but a whole host of other factors that you would want to consider as part of this process. To the question, I would only use the LSAT and the statistical profile as a starting point. Do not select schools and submit applications solely based on that statistical profile, whether you're above or below those median LSATs, because I can assure you, as we've sort of talked about already, with earlier questions, what the admissions committee is interested in is selecting the best candidates for their institution, for the legal profession. And the LSAT and the GPA are only two factors that really help us assess that determination. As Kristen put it, there are really two parts to the application process, one of which is, are you going to excel academically? And that's where the LSAT and the GPA come into play. They're there to help the admissions committee determine how will you fare at the end of your first year of law school. But all of the other components as well are equally important, such as, are you a good fit? What was the driving force and the motivation for you to go to law school and apply to law school? Those are equally important, because I can tell you, we have so many stories of people who were below our LSAT medians and GPA medians, but were admitted, were great fits and have proven to be a successful alum and attorneys. And then we have, on the flip side, those who met that statistical profile but didn't fare as well, right? And so I would not solely choose law schools to submit an application based off of just those two factors.
Yeah, and just before we wrap it up, which is, I can't believe it's already been 30 minutes, so we're virtually done, literally done and virtually done, is that that medians are midpoints, right? So half the class was above them and half the class was below them. Mm-hmm. That's all it's meant to be. Yeah. So we are done. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is really just a tiny slice of what you might experience if you came to a forum. We will be around in terms of being at cities across the country, so Boston, San Francisco, Houston, Atlanta, LA, and we hope that maybe some of you will follow up. We're sorry we didn't get to all of the questions that you had, but I think we probably could be here all day. It's good we have folks to tell us to stop.
And if you have more questions about LSAC services, the email is lsacinfo@lsac.org. And if you have questions for individual schools, please use the Schools tab on the main page to get their contact information. Next up, we have an excellent panel on Ask an Expert session with host Michelle Heck from the University of Missouri and pre-law advisor Amber White from the University of Texas at Arlington. So stick around. They'll have a lot of insider information for you. Amber is truly equipped with some questions that you should be asking and probably haven't even thought of. So in the meantime, check this video out on what is a law school forum.
This forum is exhilarating. It's fun.
I participate because it's an opportunity to reach students who I might not otherwise reach.
You're supposed to be making an informed decision and you want to have all the information. And this is another way to help that process.
LSAC Law School forums give prospective law students the chance to talk personally with representatives from law schools from around the country. The forums are a great opportunity to get answers to questions on every aspect of the admission process and a legal education.
I signed in quickly and I got a list of schools. I'm trying to look at the ones I really want to go to. So I circled them. I'm going to go through the rows, try to figure out which one's best for me.
There are a lot of schools that I'm interested in that are at this forum, and I would like to grab information from them. Is this a really good fit for me for this school? Can the representative respond to me? Tell me about the student-faculty life.
This is the opportunity for you to connect directly with law schools and for us to connect directly with you. It's a chance for you to realize that we're real people and for us to be reminded that you're certainly individuals with stories and unique attributes and not simply anonymous applicants of the future.
I had a lot of people give me their personal cards and just say, hey, you know, call us if you have questions. So I think everybody's really collaborative.
I'm trying to see what they're trying to find in a student. I need to make myself different. Maybe my experiences, they said that's where my resume really comes in handy.
The process alone of law school is stressful, so to be able to alleviate it by speaking to individuals with questions and inquiries that I have, they're easing the anxiety.
We humanize the process for people, and they realize that this is something I can do. With hard work and some preparation, I can achieve my dream of becoming an attorney.
I think that's one of the best reasons to come to a forum, is this opportunity to begin building a relationship with a school that might become your law school that you'll have for all of your life.
Each forum offers a range of workshops that aren't available anywhere else, covering everything from diversity at law school to tips for taking the LSAT to financing a legal education.
I think the reasoning that goes on in AR is very similar to the kind of reasoning you need for law school, but also for the law itself.
The workshops were awesome. The LSAT, talking about the LSAT, because that was my biggest fear coming here. And being able to go and listen to somebody who actually helped make the LSAT was just overwhelmingly exciting.
You need to know how to apply for the financial aid and when.
I think the three questions that are the most common are, first of all, how do I get financial aid? What financial aid is available? And am I going to be able to pay this money back?
I walked out with all these conceptions that, you know what, this is going to be like a mortgage. You're investing in your future, and there's ways of handling the debt.
It really gives you sort of a platform to understand the basis and the admissions process, the LSAT, sort of a holistic approach to law school.
I feel a lot better than what I did before. I learned that law school, it might be expensive, but it's not impossible, especially if it's your dream.
After speaking with a law school representative, I realized that I'm more prepared for the journey of applying for law school than I thought I was, and I'm more confident in my decision of deciding to go to law school.